You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com. This week's edition of Assembly Call Radio is coming right up. Before we get to that, a quick word about tickets and about our sponsor, SeatGeek. Getting tickets online can be far too complicated, something that you've probably experienced. With hundreds of sites and varying levels of reliability, it's hard to know who to trust, and that is why SeatGeek is the way to go. SeatGeek pulls millions of tickets into one place so you can easily find the seats you want for a price you're willing to pay. There is nothing quite like being there in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. So whether you want to support the football Hoosiers for one of their remaining home dates, or you want to plan ahead and get tickets to basketball games for this season, SeatGeek is the way to go. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone personally. It is by far the easiest way that I've found to shop for tickets, and that's what I use when I want sports tickets, when I want concert tickets. And the reason why I use SeatGeek is, again, kind of what I mentioned about how they just make the experience easier than it is anywhere else. SeatGeek will search multiple ticket sites. They grade every ticket based on a value, which is really nice. And that helps you really quickly identify the best seats that fit your budget. And every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence, which is really nice because sometimes you're on those other ticket sites, you don't feel quite as confident. And best of all, Assembly Call listeners get $20 off of your first SeatGeek purchase. So all you do is download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY today. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets. And now, here's this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio. Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 98th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 430th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, October 18th, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion. Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred Wednesday morning when CBS Sports dropped its list of the top 101 players in college basketball. Both Romeo and Juwan were on the list, Romeo at number 15 and Juwan at number 31. Here's the list of teams that also placed at least two players in the top 50. Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, Virginia, Gonzaga, Nevada, Michigan State. Look at any preseason top 25, and those teams are almost always somewhere in the top 10. Indiana is the outlier in terms of having two players on the list, but being a borderline top 25 team. Now, perhaps you think the preseason evaluations are wrong, and Indiana should be ranked right alongside those schools, or perhaps you agree that the rest of the Hoosiers roster just isn't proven enough yet to warrant that kind of preseason respect. The right answer will probably end up being somewhere in the middle. But what is undeniable is that no matter how cohesive of a team unit you build, competing at the highest levels of college basketball requires having at least a couple, and probably even one or two more, of the best individual players in the country. The sad reality is that it's been a while, probably 2013, since Indiana was seen as having at least two such players entering a season. But this year, Romeo and Juwan should give Indiana a 1-2 punch that allows the Hoosiers to compete against every team on their schedule. And Indiana would be wise to take advantage this year because it's possible we may have to wait a year or two before having multiple players so high on this list again, depending on the development of guys like Justin Smith, Jerome Hunter, and others. Still, Archie Miller's recruiting success does suggest that multiple Indiana players appearing on such preseason lists in the future will become more of the norm than the exception. and that will be a good sign that Indiana is ready to consistently go toe-to-toe with the nation's best, just like it is this year. Okay, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Kirk Ferentz of girls youth sports coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one of the world's most renowned bracketologists.
It's not Joe Lenardi. It's not Jerry Palm. It is Andy Bottoms from over at Assembly Call.
He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your Bottoms line from the last week in IU basketball?
You know, sometimes when you put the coach in there, I can't tell whether it's meant as a compliment or an insult. So it's unclear at this point.
Well, after last week.
It's based on well, I know, but then he's kind of a jerk because he's throwing up, some ungodly amount late in the fourth quarter. So maybe you think I'm a poor sport. It's tough to say. Or that I have some kind of lifetime contract or something like he does with Iowa or whatever's going on. So at any rate, that one was just in a gray area. I wasn't really sure. No, it's funny as we sit here on Thursday, even though we're a little bit late. 2 weeks from right now, we'll be doing our first true post game show. We did the Hoosier Hysteria show, but the post game show for the exhibition game will be happening right at this time in 2 weeks. So we've only got 14 days left to kind of find ways to spend our time and get ready. And we too, like the team, will work through the kinks in the after the exhibition game, but excited to know that that's not too far away on the schedule and get our first real glimpse of these guys playing against somebody other than themselves in spliced together footage on social media. So the beginning of the season has nearly arrived, and it's one that we've been waiting for. And as we have interacted with fans and things like that, I think the excitement for this is right up there for me with what as excited as people were when they were the preseason number one a few years ago, which seems a little bit odd for a team that nobody's really picking to win the Big Ten compared to that. But I would say in the years we've been doing the show, I think the fan excitement and interest level certainly rivals what it was a handful of years ago.
Yeah. And to my right, he is a columnist for The Big Lead and a co-host of The Hangover, but you know him as Indiana radio's most opinionated, polarizing, over-the-top personality.
I pretty much have an opinion on everything.
He is Ryan Phillips.
If you don't fawn all over him, he pretty much ostracizes you.
Ryan, do you have any indignant and or petty rants for us this week?
Yeah, I want to get to the poll at some point that you put out this week, but I think the big news of the week, honestly, and it's not specifically Indiana related, is the stuff that came out from this college basketball corruption trial, and we've got news that players like Zion Williamson were looking for money, and I think that relates back to Duke, and you have to realize, I think we're starting to get to the point with this that while some people may not be mentioned specifically in this Adidas trial, what we've learned from this is that nobody, even college basketball's sacred cow down there in Durham, is clean in this. And this is the way that business has been done in college basketball for a long time. And the whole thing needs to be cleaned up. And I know a lot of people were fearing what would come out from this trial and how it would damage college basketball. I think it's a good thing because I think it's exposing a lot of stuff that needed to be out in the open. And it's finally exposing certain people for the hypocrites they really are. So I'm sure certain people. I'm sure we will talk about that as the year goes on because I'm sure that more will come out. But I just think that was worth watching this week as that trial winds down. That I think a lot of things have popped up that are targeting some people I don't think a lot of people thought would get dragged into this and now are.
All right, here's what we're going to talk about this week. The NBA announced a major initiative with the G League that could change the calculus for elite high school seniors trying to decide their next step. We'll discuss that. Coach K made some ridiculous comments. We have to get Ryan's reaction to those. And then in the first installment of a new segment called Ryan's Being Stupid Again, we're going to debate him on the assertion he's made several times on this show that Indiana may actually
I did not agree to this segment, by the way. I did not agree to the segment title.
Well, that actually came from an email from a listener. So out of respect for the listener, since it was his idea, we had to call the segment that. So
no truth to the rumor that listener was my dad or anything like that. I don't want anything or one of my burner accounts either.
No truth. And then with whatever time we have left, we will answer your questions. All of that coming on this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio. Before we do all that, before we get to this week's top story, I want to remind you real quick about the best way to shop online for great deals on IU basketball and football tickets. Just remember the URL iutickets.shop. It will take you right to SeatGeek, where you can immediately find the best deals on IU basketball tickets, other sports tickets, concert tickets, and more. As a bonus, you can use the promo code ASSEMBLY to get $20 off your first purchase. And when you use that URL, iutickets.shop, we actually get paid a commission for referring you. So it is a great way to support the show. Coach, I'm wondering if you might have any ideas what we could do with the extra revenue that we're going to get from people using iutickets.shop.
Beer, cheese curds, and music. It doesn't get any better.
Works for me. Beer, cheese curds, and music. But first, you need to buy tickets. And the best way to do it is with the URL iutickets.shop. And remember, promo code ASSEMBLY for $20 off your first purchase. Again, it is iutickets.shop.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, so let's talk about the top story which broke earlier today. ESPN's Jonathan Givony reported that starting in the summer of 2019, the G League will offer what they are calling select contracts worth $125,000 for that first year to elite prospects who are at least 18 years old but not yet eligible for the NBA draft. As Givony explained it, they will target recent or would-be high school graduates who otherwise would have likely spent just one season playing college basketball, the so-called one-and-dones, enticing them not only with the six-figure salary, but then the opportunities to benefit from NBA infrastructure, off-court development programs, and just I guess the prestige of being a professional. Although you could certainly debate whether there's more prestige being a high-profile player at a big-time college program or in the G League.
Whether you'll actually get more money.
Yeah, well, that is, and what's funny about that is obviously lots of reactions came out. Adrian Wojnarowski had a really good one. He said, "I have doubts about how many top players will go this route. Some, yes, but G League is full of early connecting flights, long bus rides, small gyms. It isn't glamorous. Big-time NCAA ball still has the trappings of exposure, packed houses, private jets, and you'll get paid there too." So it's interesting. It's certainly an interesting development, maybe suggestive of a bigger initiative to come. I don't know. Maybe this is the first step of something bigger. But Ryan, how did this strike you when you heard the news, and how big of an impact do you think it'll actually have on guys bypassing college and taking this route?
I think it's a step in the right direction, or maybe they're moving in the right direction, but I don't think that this is going to lure guys. Some guys who maybe are going to struggle in college academically may do it instead of going to, you've seen some guys go play overseas now. But the fact that they'll get plucked and be able to play and all that stuff, sure, that'll be great. But I still think the top guys are going to go to college. And the reason why is, as you said, exposure. Most of these schools, you think, well, the NBA has world-class facilities and all this. Well, the most of these universities have the same level, if not better, facilities than what the G League and NBA teams are going to give you. So I don't think there's a huge draw there. It's a step in the right direction to be able to say, okay, we'll pay you to skip college. And I've always thought that the G League, what I thought the solution would be, and my suggestion for a while has been, let high school kids go to the draft, but they can't play in the NBA for the first year. They have to play in the G League. So you get your contract and you get all that stuff, and it's a risk for the NBA teams because you'll lose out basically on a year of usefulness, but you will be a professional. You'll be drafted, but you have to wait a year and play in the G League. I've kind of thought that was the path. You're not getting paid. Again, given what the shoe companies are dropping, $125,000 ain't that much. So I think it's a step, sort of a move in the right direction, but I don't think it's going to be that big a lure for guys unless they were pondering skipping college anyway.
Two other interesting points I thought, Rob Doster had an interesting one. Someone mentioned that, hey, now maybe shoe companies can actually, get, above board deals with these guys. And as he said, well, the shoe companies have a lot of money invested in the college program, so they're probably still going to want those players going to the college programs. And as Brian Snow said, you said exposure. There's two different types of exposure, right? There's the exposure of being in the G League in front of NBA teams, but there's also the exposure of, now you're playing against real men and you really get exposed for what you are, whereas you might be able to hide in college a little bit against kind of lesser players because they're not professionals. So
sure, and there's the idea of playing in college. You're going to be playing in more high pressure situations than you are in the G League too. You know, so there's kind of, or at least perceived pressure situations and all that. So I don't know.
Andy, what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I thought the exposure thing was interesting because you think about a guy like Hamidou Diallo that went to Kentucky. I mean, he was going to be the first kind of like, they talked about him being like a none and done where he enrolled early, was going to redshirt. And I think at the time, even looking back now, you'd say he'd have been wiser to go in before he played a minute of college basketball and do it that way, because what happened after that was it kind of reaffirmed every fear they had about him, where he was a super athlete, but couldn't shoot the ball, didn't really have a great basketball IQ. And so he ended up, he still got drafted this year, but he fell a lot further. And I think a year prior would have gone a lot further. And that was with a guy who, even kind of got exposed playing college basketball in that way. And so now you look at guys who are going to be, going against guys who are really trying to earn their way into the league. And for those guys, the light at the end of the tunnel for them is, hey, I might get called up to an NBA team this year. For these guys, that's not a possibility in their 1 year that's there. So there's a different level of motivation where everybody's going to be out to get these guys. So I mean, it's good for people to have the option that want to do that, and that, college isn't for them. I think that's fine. I just don't know that it's it's just an obvious choice that a lot of people are going to take. And I think until a couple people do it and they see that it can work out, I don't really know that the Darius Bazley or Baisley was going to do that. But now it sounds like even he's going to skip the G League, where he was going to go to Syracuse, then he was going to go to the G League. Now it doesn't sound like he's going to do that. He's just going to wait a year and enter the draft. And that was one of the things people said about that scenario as well.
Yeah.
Does he just go get exposed there and then he ends up hurting himself in the long run?
So I think we all kind of agree. I mean, it's interesting. It's nice to have the option, but probably not going to have that big of an impact, really, except maybe setting the going rate for top players. As Coach said in the chat, 125,000 or I'm going to the G League, to the colleges. So, who knows? But I guess we're all pretty much in agreement with that, right?
Yeah, I think they're sort of moving in the right direction, but it's going to take a lot more than that, I think, to lure guys away from college and the exposure that you're going to get in college.
Yep. Okay, coming up on the assembly call, let's get to that in just a second, Ryan.
Okay.
We have to discuss the asinine and disingenuous comments that Coach K made this week in response to questions about the Jim Gatto Adidas trial in New York. Ryan, I'm guessing you'll have a thing or two to say about that, so stick with us here on the assembly call. You are listening to the Assembly Call. If you want to get replays of our show, listen to our daily Banner Morning IU news updates, or subscribe to our free IU basketball email newsletter, visit assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts,
chat mobbers,
or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel. You will be privy to all of the between segment banner that doesn't make it into the radio show or podcast edit.
It's just guys clowning around.
Indeed. Come clown around with us on YouTube, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. And guys, I'm sure you've been following, just like I have, and a lot of our audience, the first of the three trials resulting from the FBI investigation that has been going on in New York. Closing arguments were actually delivered on Thursday. And this trial has really laid bare a lot of what we've all assumed was kind of going on in college basketball for a long time, with shoe companies paying players to go to certain schools, and even the schools themselves offering money for players. And, what has been a little bit surprising, I suppose, is how many big current names in the sport have been brought into it, most notably Bill Self in Kansas, also Duke freshman Zion Williamson, one of the latest names brought into it. And so with all of this going on, you might expect the dean of college basketball coaches, Duke's Mike Krzyzewski, to, have something thoughtful to say on the subject, right? No. If you missed it, here's basically what Coach K had to say when he was asked about this. He said, "I think it's minute. It's a blip. It's not what's happening." And this basically echoed comments that Roy Williams made, where he basically said, gall darn, he was dumbfounded. That world that they're explaining out there, that world that is on national news, I'm not familiar with, period. Number one, I know that you guys don't believe them. I don't think anybody believes them. But, Brian, let's get your thoughts on this first. I mean, I guess, what is even the purpose of being so disingenuous to pretend like you don't even know that it's going on? I mean, it just, I don't know. Like, I read that and it almost made me angry. And I don't really get angry, but it almost made me angry that he would be, I guess, just that disrespectful to the people who care about college basketball and tune into that, and who, make him this hero that he is. I don't know. It really rubbed me the wrong way.
I've said this for a while, and over the last 10 years, you've seen a shift in Mike Krzyzewski, and I think it's always been there, but you're starting to see it seep in more and more, becoming more like his mentor, Bob Knight. And you've seen it in his irritation with the media at times. I mean, he's, you talk to people who deal with him on a daily basis, and one of the things he's really awful, he's horrible to student media in Durham. He's horrible to reporters that question him. If you don't fall in line with whatever he does, if you challenge him on questions, he'll basically ostracize you. He'll rip you. He'll do whatever. He has threatened to pull, behind the scenes, threatened to pull credentials from people who question him and talk back to him and things like that. I mean, he's not the guy that's been built up in the media. He's a nice, and quite frankly, he could be the nicest guy in the world, but the way he deals with people professionally, I've always known this was there. And we've talked about it before repeatedly.
Episode 366.
And other people have talked about it repeatedly. It's not just me. But what I'll say is, in this case, and I talked to Kent Sterling about this week when I was on, if one of these guys, one of these coaches would just step up and say, you know what? This is the way the game is played. I wish it wasn't. Here's what I know. Everybody else is doing it. And, I wish this wasn't this way, and I'll try and stop it. But we all need to get together and do something about this. And was just honest about it. And everybody would respect that guy and be like, you know what? I get it. You have a contract. You have a family. You have to compete with these other guys. It's not your fault. Like, this is the way this has been built up. Let's work to a solution. But denying that it even happens or that you have any idea what it is, come on. You really think that Mike Krzyzewski is getting 3 out of the top 5 players in the country and not doing this stuff? Zion Williamson was asking for a house, a job for his parents, money, all this stuff. And we're supposed to believe that he went to Duke for free? I mean, come on.
It's the brotherhood. The brotherhood at Duke, Ryan.
Exactly, yeah.
One of these coaches needs to just pull a Pete Bell from Blue Chips and just let it all out there.
And I said this, what I talked about it, and it's been compared to this a lot, but I talked about this with Kent too, is it's like the steroid era in baseball. If one of those guys had come out and said, yeah, I did steroids because I had to compete. I was I was going to lose money as a free agent if I didn't do this and I didn't compete. That's money, that's food out of my family's mouth. Everybody would have respected that guy and been like, yeah, we get it. Okay, it sucks.
Yeah.
You're in a tough situation. But
we all know now this is how the game is played. Everybody understands.
And calling it a blip or acting like you're not concerned or you're not paying attention. It's not
what's happening. It's like,
shut up. Like, it's gaslighting. I mean, it's just like, nope, nothing to see here. Like, I don't know what they're talking about. I have not been reading about this every day, praying that my name doesn't show up. Nope, that's not me. Like, come on. Every college coach in the country is checking this every morning to make sure, oh, God, please don't be. Even if they're innocent, they're checking it to make sure there's no, they're not going to catch any shrapnel from this bomb. But no, I just, it's so disingenuous. But honestly, it's exactly what I expected from Mike Krzyzewski.
Well, I mean, there's essentially 2 options, right? If you're saying something like that, you're either willfully ignorant of what's going on, or you're lying to everybody. And
there's
when you
no
listen
chance they're ignorant.
No, well, that's what I'm saying. And so then you look at these guys who have such control over these programs, the way they act. There's, option A of the scenarios that I laid out is absolutely not even feasible to me. So. Yeah, this is the thing when, Pitino comes on and it's like, oh, I'm dumbfounded by this. I'm floored by this. I'm flabbergasted. I had no idea that this kind of thing was going on. Like, you just must think people are as dumb as humanly possible to actually believe that you don't know that that's going on, which is insulting, as you said, or you're just lying to everybody, which is really the far more likely of those 2 scenarios. And you're just hoping that, your name's not going to get caught up in it, which feels for virtually everyone inevitable at this point.
Hey, arrogance cuts both ways. It can be a driver of great success, and it can also be a reason why, you would lie like this and act like you can just tell whatever story you want publicly as if people don't know that you're straight up lying to their face.
I like to feel
Well,
that
the same thing. Duke has the Lance Thomas thing, and I think wasn't it William Avery? Wasn't he caught up in some of that stuff? Or
and Maggette and all those guys.
Yeah.
No,
so some of this,
just
it's like
blips,
you can't
all
even say
blips.
that this is never even brought up with your program to a point where you can't acknowledge that it's happening. Like there have been allegations of those kinds of things already
for years. Any top program's going to have allegations like that because that's the way the freaking game is played. By the way, I like to think that my arrogance is a driver of success. That's fair, right? Would you guys say? Sorry.
I mean, yes.
Thank you.
But okay, but you don't come on here and lie to our audience's face. And if you did, you know, we wouldn't want you on the show. Like that's the difference. You know, these people, they come on there in these press conferences and they just act like that's okay to just come. And I realize, that's kind of part of the job is you.
And no one's ever going to call them out and be like, you're just a straight liar in a press conference because they are who they are. And
because they bully people.
Exactly. And they have so much power that they can tell you, oh, you're going to challenge me? You don't get a credential anymore. I mean, they have the power to do that. So, I mean, Coach K is on a commercial every 5 minutes during March Madness. Like, you really think that the NCAA is going to go after that guy?
Yeah.
Well, and like Dockage said, these guys get up and they preach about leadership. And then when push comes to shove, it's the last thing that they actually show.
Yep. Okay, coming up, those of you listening
big
on the radio
show,
Friday night, big fan, maybe switching over to high school football, so be sure to catch the replay at assemblycall.com. For everyone else, we're introducing a new segment. Ryan doesn't like the name. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. If you are a serious IU Hoops fan, then you need to be subscribed to our free IU basketball email newsletter.
There's a high-level operation going on out there.
You will get our six-banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our detailed post-game analysis emails once the season begins. This content is why more than 6,000 of your fellow IU fans are already subscribed to our list. And joining them is easy. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com.
Make no excuses.
Can we get some basketball, please?
All right, back to talking basketball with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. I'm Jerod Morris. So, Ryan, a listener took you to task. I received an email, and I want to read it here, and this is going to be the jumping off point for this segment. We won't say that this segment is officially called Ryan's Being Stupid Again. We'll just use that as the tentative name for tonight. And that is not something that I came up with or that Andy came up with. This was actually an email from Steve. The subject was Ryan's being stupid again, and here is the email. He said, I've heard on at least 2 occasions Ryan say, with no rationale to back it up, boy, next year we might be even better. Dude, I love you, but slow your roll. Next year we lose what, in my opinion, will be the backbone of our scoring, Juwan, Romeo, and Evan. Who's replacing all those buckets next year? Yes, the freshmen will be second-year guys, and that's a huge step up, but ask Ryan where 3 guaranteed double-digit scores next year are coming from. Yes, he can start his list with Justin Smith. So, Ryan, we will allow you to make your opening statement, because I will say that I've heard you make this claim before on the show, and and on Kent Sterling's show as well, and it's always struck me as a little bit curious, but not worth necessarily opening up a debate about. But I think it'll be fun, because I don't necessarily agree with you. But let's hear your opening statement, and Andy, I don't know how you feel about it, although I have a hunch, and then we'll debate it.
By the way, Evan Fitzner's a part of the backbone of the team. When did that happen?
He said backbone of our scoring. I mean, he's going to shoot 40+% from downtown. That's tough to replace.
I agree, but he may not even start. And we're betting on a lot there. I'm not saying he won't be good, but come on. All right, here's why I think that will be this will come to pass. And you lose Romeo, you lose Juwan. Obviously, huge misses. You also could be getting Trace Jackson Davis and Keon Brooks, or add your 5-star amazing player there. Plus, you will have a senior point guard in Devontae Green. You will have a sophomore, really good distributing guard in Rob Finney. You'll have Deron Davis as a senior, assuming everything goes well this year. You'll be a senior. You'll have Justin Smith as a junior. You'll have Jerome Hunter developed as well. You'll have a shooter in Demezy Anderson a year into the program. You'll have Race Thompson, who we all think is going to be really, really good in his second full year. You will have a guy in Clifton Moore who, I mean, super high ceiling. If he sticks around, maybe he becomes a scoring threat. Maybe he fills that Evan Fitzner role as a guy who can sort of play on the perimeter. He's not a pure shooter, but can sort of play on the perimeter and has the size to get in there. And then you have a guy like Jake Forrester. You have, all these guys will be a year older, and there's so much talent there. They may not have the high-end talent that they'll have this year, but they will have a bunch of really good players who can all play minutes, who can all do the things you need to do in the Big Ten. I do believe. I think that this team has more high ceiling players than they'll have next year, but it's not about the high ceiling players. It's about depth in college basketball now. It's about having a lot of guys who can do things. Plus, again, Justin Smith looks like he's headed to be a high ceiling player. Jerome Hunter, we all love, and I think will be fantastic. And then you've got Rob Finney. You've got Race Thompson. You've got all these guys that you're beyond that. And if you want high-end talent, guess what? Trace Jackson-Davis, Keon Brooks, whoever else will be added to that mix. So, yeah, I stick by that. I think that this team has a really nice ceiling on it. I think that the depth of the team will be so much better next year because these guys will all have a year in the system. And I think that, the biggest, as we've always said, there's a lot of freshmen on this team. The best thing about freshmen is that they become sophomores and they'll be that much better.
Andy, do you want to take a stab at this first?
Yeah, I mean, I see where I'm kind of like you. I mean, I've heard him make this statement. I see where he's coming from, and we've all talked about how this class can be a foundational one for the program, and how much we look forward to watching the guys outside of Romeo, be 3-4 year players. So in that regard, I get it. I think the biggest question that I have is, certainly you're replacing Juwan and Romeo. I think in Juwan's case, you have a lot more guys lined up that you can at least think about, hey, they could replace him or replace him by committee, I think is the more likely approach. But you have a lot of front court depth of guys that are going to be around. So that part I can get. The part that I struggle with is the Romeo piece of, he's looked at this year because it's something that they didn't really have a year ago. And there's nobody really like him on the roster unless all of a sudden, Hunter is able to play a little bit more of that 2-guard, which is possible. Unless you do get Keon Brooks and maybe he's going to play, as a bigger wing in the backcourt and things like that. I think that's just positionally, if nothing else, the piece that makes me wonder, can the ceiling for next year's team with that, kind of no obvious replacement or even replacement by committee for him, can they really be better?
I mean, like I think with Juwan, it's easy to say that you can replace him on paper because you look at guys like Justin and Jerome and they've got similar measurables.
Race Thompson.
Yes. Okay. But what you lose with Juwan is your unquestioned leader. And how many times have we seen this program really struggle with leadership transitions? So that's my
with
question.
A different coach, though.
Okay. No, that's fine. And that's fair. But still, who's the leader? Like right now with Juwan this year, they have an unquestioned leader who not only does it from a personality standpoint, but has some skins on the wall, is a real player. You don't have anybody ready to step into that role next year. And granted, part of that is because, this year a lot of that leadership is taken up by Juwan, but also Zach McRoberts, a guy that we haven't mentioned yet. And I realize his talent doesn't overwhelm people, but, there is something about the tone that he sets in practice. You're still going to have to replace that. And I think you can get more talented with his minutes going to somebody else. But I think it's at least worth mentioning that that's another real leader too. And that is one thing that this team has this year is 2 big-time leaders. And then, of course, just the prodigious scoring ability of Romeo Langford. So I think next year's team can be deep. But the other thing is, Ryan, I think you listed out all the guys, and that's great. The roster is going to be fine. Now put it into a lineup. What's your lineup with that team? Because
I don't know, but I trust Archie to figure it out. I guess that's also
but
where
that doesn't make any difference for this debate. That's what I'm saying.
No,
what is your lineup?
But I'm saying, I think that's part of it, though, is that I trust the coaching to develop a leader. I trust the coaching staff to develop a leader. I trust Juwan to help develop a leader. I don't think he's just going to be I'm taking all the leadership and I'm not passing anything on.
No, that's true. That's true. That's a good point.
So I trust them to develop that leadership. Yeah, you can't name it right now, but I trust that somebody will step up. And I trust that this coaching staff will develop that. This coaching staff will develop players to fit in certain roles. Again, we've said they don't do a 1 through 5 point guard, shooting guard, wing, whatever. It's a sort of a mix of what they're going to do. And so you can get a guy, you look at Justin Smith and Jerome Hunter, and you're like, well, they're about the same size. They're about the same length. Are they going to take minutes from each other? No, They can both play at the same time. You can get Jake Forrester out there with Race Thompson. You could get these mix and match lineups because they're getting versatile guys. If you want to talk about Romeo Langford is a NBA talent, high-end guy. That's almost impossible to replace no matter who you get. You're not going to specifically replace him. But what happens sometimes when you have a guy like that is you can be too reliant on a guy like that, and you can defer to a guy like that too much. We've seen that with Indiana before. So I would say that I think that it might actually I'm not saying
I guess we should see this team play with Romeo
exactly, and I'm not saying that having Romeo holds you back. Like I know someone mentioned that one time when I was talking to them about it, but I'm saying that a guy like Jerome Hunter being able to develop this year and not be the number one option. I mean, if you watch that guy in high school, he's a legit high end guy who is still developing. The fact that he gets to sit back and kind of develop this year and then try and step into the light next year, the fact that Justin Smith, I think we're all expecting a lot of him, but he doesn't have to be the number one option this year, gives those guys a chance to develop and become front end guys. And if there's two of them, maybe you replace what Romeo could provide. And if you've got Race Thompson and Forrester and Deron Davis and all these other combinations of guys, maybe they replace the production you got from a guy like Juwan Morgan. But again, I think that part of it is my faith that, again, a leader will emerge. Part of it is my faith that the coaching staff knows how to use all this talent. Part of it is my faith that they will recruit the next high-end talent. And part of it is my faith that these young guys who are freshmen are hungry and will develop and be better. And so, yeah, maybe not on paper, but it maybe on paper it doesn't look like next year they'll be better. But my faith in these guys, and I think that what I project happening is what makes it to me that they. And I've also always said not that they will be better, but they could be better based on what they have and what the roster has. Obviously, it's all a projection, but I'm saying that if you look at the roster, they could be even better next year because of the disbursement of talent.
And it's hard to project because, I mean, Devontae Green could be like an honorable mention all Big Ten player this year for all we know. And then you look at
and then he's coming back for his senior year. Maybe there's your leader. Like, we don't know.
Yeah, so that, and I will grant some of that. It just, to me, you have two, known quantities, which again is odd to say about Romeo, but his talent, to build around what you want in Romeo. Next year's team just projects to have a lot more question marks, it seems like. So we'll see. Like, I'm not saying that I think things are going to fall off a cliff like they did, in the previous era. Right. I mean, I think we'll be really good next year. I just don't think that projecting it forward, it's hard for me to see how we'll be as good as we are this year. But
quite frankly, in 3 months, we could be looking at this and being like, oh my God, they're going to be amazing next year. You know what I mean? Like or we could be looking at, how are they going to fill this, that, and the other? I'm obviously projecting at where the level of depth is going to be on the team and projecting that possibly a high-end talent or two is going to come in to add to that. And again, relying on the coaching and the leadership to emerge.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. Andy, hop in here.
I just think this is the beauty of sports where we can debate the merits of a team that we've never seen play against a team that we have no idea what the roster will look like. So,
a team that we've never seen play, and then the team guys will follow transfer.
We don't know. Like,
oh my God!
Yeah, what could go wrong? It seems like a great idea.
Yeah, I know. When Dane Fife is coaching the team next year, and that's a whole new roster, we're gonna reflect back on this conversation and be like, why did we waste 15 minutes of people's time debating these two teams? I will say, Ryan, in the chat, it's about even. It seems about split, and I feel like a couple of people have actually been swayed. They've said that you have a good argument. We've got Ryan is spitting fire, great argument. So some people are agreeing with you.
So half the people agree with me and half the people are wrong, is what you're saying?
There we are.
No, we knew that was coming.
I had to throw that out. I'm sorry, people.
We knew that was coming.
Hey, you know what? After yesterday, I'm on a roll, guys.
You are on a roll. You are on a roll. So anyway, that was the first segment of Ryan's being stupid again. But perhaps a misnomer because you did present some good arguments. I still think you're wrong, and I think you're being overly optimistic in every case to project that, at least as far as I look at it. But you made more of a reasonable argument than I thought you would. So I'll at least give you that.
Okay.
Would you like to make a closing statement?
I'm right. I think I'm right. No,
Ryan's wrong.
It's a great drop.
How dare you, Megan? No, I look, obviously it's a projection, and it's a lot of it is based on my faith in the recruiting, my faith in the development staff, my faith in these freshmen being hungry. I think the thing I love about this class coming in, these guys all seem hungry. Like they really want, not only do they want to be great, they want to get better and be a part of something. And I think that this group gets brought up a lot, but the movement, the recruiting group that came in, they got on campus and it just never felt like they had that gear to get to the next level. And these guys do. And we've seen it all off season. We've heard it all off season, and we've heard them talking about it all off season. They want to be like a legendary class. And there's something to be said for that when these guys are challenging each other. You know, it's not just about getting better yourself. It's about making the guy next to you better, because then when that guy gets better, he makes you better. And so I just feel like there's something special about this group and what they're bringing. And I think they have a built-in leader in Rob Finney as well, too. So we'll
I do agree with that.
Yeah.
I thought we agreed never to mention the movement again.
Well, maybe you agree to that. I don't know. I don't pay attention. I don't pay attention.
Cautionary tale.
I don't pay attention.
Ryan just talks.
Are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah, I don't pay attention when you're talking.
Ryan just talks and then takes his earphones out when other people are talking.
Exactly. Yeah. I
just
turn it off.
Just chimes in when we point at him. Okay.
I felt like we had an amazing conversation on all levels.
Thank you, Archie. Appreciate that. All right, coming up in our final segment, we're going to answer your questions, and we got a lot of time to do so, too, including what would surprise us most this season, what record will win the Big Ten, and if this team could actually be better than the 2018, and a bunch more. That's next. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call. We are wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms, and as is our custom here in segment number 4, we're going to answer your questions. And you can always send us questions on Twitter, in our new Assembly Call community, or you can leave us a voicemail with a question throughout the week at 317-762-6253. That's 317-ROB-MAKE. And we've got actually a couple left over from last week that I want to get to. So this first one, guys, is from East Coast Hoosier, who says, not counting potential NCAA tournament results, what would surprise you the most if it happened this season? And that could be a positive surprise or a negative surprise, but just not necessarily like results-wise. Andy, what would surprise you the most this year?
I guess I would say, well, I mean, I'd certainly be surprised if I know it said not counting NCAA tournament results, but I would be surprised if they didn't make the tournament at all. Like, to me, that would be a pretty surprising development. And I would even say, like, I think Sports Illustrated released their Big Ten preview today, and they just go by their like 1 to 353 now rankings, and it had IU 6th. Like that would surprise me to not be in the top 4 or 5 in the league. So I guess those would be the things from a result standpoint. Nothing individually player wise came to mind, but maybe that I would be surprised if neither Romeo or Juwan made first team All Big Ten. I think maybe you could argue not both of them would, but I would be stunned if one of them did not.
Ryan, what would surprise you?
I agree with Andy. I think it's if you're not in the top 4 in the Big Ten, I think that would be a shock. I just think that I know we've been wrong about the Big Ten the last couple. Everybody has. They've been like, oh, it's down this year and it's great, and it's up this year and it's down. But this year it just looks like there's an opening to be really good and to really take a shot at stab at the top of the conference. So that would surprise me if they're not top 4.
Yeah, I would be surprised. I don't know how you define a breakout, but I would be surprised if Justin Smith doesn't break out. Like, I'd be surprised if he's not a guy who at least is averaging close to double digits and probably pulling in 5-6 rebounds, and a guy where we look at and say he really like took it to the next level. I think that would. You
expect to be able to rely on him though, like consistency wise?
Yes. Okay. I think he will be a more consistent player, and I think we saw it toward the end of last year. So I expect a continuation of that. And it's hard to really say that you'd be surprised about anything from a freshman either way, because we know how volatile freshmen can be. I will be surprised if Rob Finney is not a guy by Big Ten play that we're relying on for 12 to 15 minutes a game, maybe more. Like I think I actually wouldn't be surprised if he's starting. This doesn't mean that I'm off the Devontae Green train, but I just think Rob has really impressed everybody, and everything you hear is positive. And, we know what kind of maturity he has, and I think physically he's even more ready to play maybe than people thought. So, especially when you hear Archie talk about how far along his defense is. So I would be surprised, even as a freshman, if he's not a guy you can really count on in Big Ten play. Those would be the two things I would say. Good question, East Coast. Okay, this next question is from Joel. Andy, I'll send this to you to you first. Will 15-5 win the Big Ten regular season? Of course, it's now a 20-game league schedule. Just for some context here are the records for the Big Ten champions going back, starting from last year. In 2018, Michigan State was 16-2. 2017, Purdue was 14-4. 2016, Indiana 15-3. 2015, Wisconsin 16-2. Then you go 15-3, 14-4, 13-5, 16-2. So that's what it's been for about the last 8 years. Do you think 15-5 will be enough, or do you think someone's going to have to get to 16 or 17 to win it?
I don't think that would win it outright. I would feel relatively comfortable saying that, but I think you could see a tie for it at 15-5. If for no other, and I don't know that I'd say that in a lot of years, but I think in a year like this where, we talked about this a little bit last week, I think everybody's going with Michigan State to win it almost by default based on talent level and Tom Izzo, but I don't see them being head and shoulders above everybody else. And then we talked about how crowded that, those next tiers were, and you could see teams kind of beating up on one another within there. So I haven't looked at how the unbalanced schedule might affect that. Obviously a little bit less, because now you've got a couple more conference games, but I could see that maybe splitting the regular season championship, but I don't think outright, but I think it's somewhat unique to the makeup of the league this year.
Ryan, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think that you're aiming at 16 wins if you want to win the conference this year. I think that is the aim. I agree with Andy. I think you could probably win it in a tie at 15-5, but you're aiming for 16. And that's if you want to win the conference, you got to figure out a way to get to 16 wins. I think that's the projection. Of course, anything can happen. It's volatile. It's this is the first time anybody's going to be playing 20 conference games, so we don't know how that's going to shake out. But I would say, yeah, you're aiming for 16 wins. That's the goal if you want to win the conference. And 15 could probably get you a win at a tie as a not outright title.
You're listening to Assembly Call Radio. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. We are answering listener questions here as we wrap up another week talking IU basketball. One of the things that's happened ever since Romeo committed is people have drawn parallels between this year's team and the 2008 team. That team had Eric Gordon, who was the last recruit, kind of the stature of Romeo, who came to Indiana. And they also had DJ White, one of the top 30, 40 players in Indiana history. So the parallels between Romeo and Juwan were quite clear. And so we got this question on Twitter. This roster seems similar with an experienced forward and a young 5-star shooting guard to the 2008 team. They ended with a 25-8 record. Could this team be that good minus the year-end debacle? And again, that was the team that was 17-1. They were ranked, I think, as high as 7th in the country, and then the bottom just fell out when all the Sampson nonsense happened, and big fan of the show, Dan Dockich, took over for the final 7 games of the year. So, Ryan, as you reflect back on that team, how do you think this team stacks up to that team? Especially when you look at the other guys on the roster. It's
an easy comparison to make. I think this team has more depth. I think this team is more athletic. It's going to be hard to know exactly what you've got with this team again until you see them roll out and you see these guys, how the rotations work out and things like that. You've got on this list that you think Gordon is better than Romeo. I think Gordon was a better scorer than Romeo is going to be, but I think Romeo is a better all-around player. But that again is kind of a wash because Gordon was one of the best pure scorers to come out of high school in a long, long time.
Gordon was also hurt for the second half of the year, which kind of stunk for him.
But I think Romeo might be a better all-around player, maybe not as big statistic. He may not have the statistical year that Gordon had. I do agree that DJ White better than Juwan Morgan, as you said, one of the top 30, 40 players in IU history, and
if you gasp at that, go back and look at DJ's numbers. Yeah, he was really good.
One of the most underrated players to ever play at Indiana. Yeah. And remember, he missed a year where he would have been amazing in that year across from Killingsworth and all those other guys, Robert Vaden and whatever. He would have been amazing that year, and he missed it because he hurt his foot. You've got Armand Bassett over IU's guards. At that point, Armand was decent. He wasn't what he became when he transferred. So I think
still shot 45% from 3-point range.
Yeah, no, he was a great shooter, and he really did contribute that year. But I think that and maybe individually, one-on-one, he's better than IU's guards, but I think there's more depth for IU's guards this year. So,
yes,
but that is
more depth, yeah.
That is a fair comparison, though. If you're looking at a team to compare this to, I think that's a fair comparison. And then you look at the ceiling that team had and where they could have gone if not for the meltdown at the end of the year. I think that's a projection where you're looking at, okay, yeah, this team can sort of live up to that. Can it live up to that? And that's sort of a goal to live up to. That team, quite frankly, that IU team should have won the Big Ten that year. Absolutely, 100%.
Oh yeah, I mean they should have had a 1 or 2 seed. I mean that's what they were. That's what they were kind of on track for before the bottom fell out.
Yeah, exactly.
Andy, do you agree with that general assessment of that comparison?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like an easy one to make based on that, and yeah, I think you had a lot of JUCO guys and at least some older players that were, role players and guys coming off the bench for that 07-08 team versus a lot of guys IU's going to be counting on in those roles are going to be freshmen, albeit ones I would think we all believe are more talented. So
yes, certainly.
It's kind of an odd mix. Maybe the highs of the one team are a little bit higher in terms of the top end talent, but I think depth top to bottom is probably better for this year.
You said this year's team is more athletic. Are you underrating the athletic ability of DeAndre Thomas and Mike White? And some of those
I do
guys
not believe it is possible to underrate the athletic ability of DeAndre Thomas.
No. Let's see. Okay, Abe says, what effect, if any, do you think Juwan and Romeo being named to preseason watch list will have on the team's expectations? Correct me. I mean, do you guys? I don't think it really changes anything about the expectations. That's
zero
what you would assume.
Change.
Yeah, because they're clearly in the top 20 at their position, so I don't think that really changes anything. If you had to guess, when do you think Trace Jackson Davis will make his announcement on college he will be attending?
Whenever Trace Jackson Davis is comfortable with making that decision is my answer.
I mean, I think he's going to sign in the early period, which is November 14th through the 21st. So I think it'll certainly be by then. Everybody that you kind of hear and read says sometime late October, and we're kind of getting there. So I would just kind of be ready at any point, really. I think the clock is ticking now. He's taken all of his official visits. So I would just keep your eye on Twitter. Because I don't know if an actual announcement will be set up, but I guess time will tell about that. Then maybe we can end on this question from our friends at the Hoosier Sound. What is one thing that you are all looking forward to the most as the season is about to start? So maybe let's say one kind of underrated thing or something that we haven't really talked about that much that you're really looking forward to as the season is about to start, Andy. Besides, of course, us being able to hang out like 4 times a week.
Oh,
that's going to be great, guys.
Yeah, that goes without saying.
The chemistry that the three of you have.
Just trail off after that. I mean, I'm really looking forward to see how all these new pieces fit together. I don't know that that's an under the radar thing to look at, but to me, I think that's the biggest challenge for the coaching staff is you have a lot of talent. We've all talked about that, but how does it all fit together and how does the rotation shake itself out? And that'll take time. And we'll figure out what that looks like in the end. But to me, being able to figure out how it's all going to come together and can it come together to be as good as we all hope that it will be, is what I'll be looking at, particularly in the non-conference part of the season.
Ryan?
I'm interested to see how Archie Miller deals with having this much talent. He's never had this much talent before. He's never had these many guys who can contribute on a high level in college basketball at his disposal. How does he use it? Some guys mess that up, they're just because they don't know how to use it. How do you have, but does he have a plan? I'm sure he does, but what is his plan?
He has a plan for everything.
Exactly. No, but that's the question you ask is, okay, what's his plan? What is he going to do? How's he going to display this? How's he going to deploy these guys? That's fascinating to me because sometimes there have been times where teams have too much talent, where guys don't get enough minutes. They don't get into a rhythm. They don't find their way. And really talented guys fall out of favor or whatever because of it. How does Archie prevent that from happening? How does he make it so everybody feels like they're a part of this team and everybody feels, in the mix and ready to go?
Yep. All righty. Well, that will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.